I'm Minessa, and this is Research Administration in a Nutshell, a series where I make short videos about different activities that we engage in as research administrators and what it's like to be an RA. Drop a like on the video or subscribe to the channel on YouTube for more research administration stuff. And a massive, massive thank you to all of the supporters on Patreon who help keep my channel alive. More information on how you can support at the end, but for now, let's get going. Minessa, and welcome back to this segment that I'm calling How to Start Your Relationship with Your PIs Off on the Right Foot. And this is our second episode. I love doing these little mini episodelets. It's just so fun. I love recording. Okay, can I just say, I just said I love recording. I have to pause on that because I have never said that before. Up until just this moment, I used to say I hated recording and I loved going live. And just now I said this and I'm like, whoa, I feel like I learned something about myself on camera. That's pretty cool. Okay, so we're going to learn something else today. Today we're going to talk about how you use grants, right? When you get a new portfolio and a new PI, and we talked in our first episode about building the relationship and talking about things that matter to you and why you do what you do and so on. And then the next part of this is understanding the grants of the investigator that you have been given. So for each investigator that you're given, they're going to have a series of things that you have to deal with. They're going to have grants that are active. They're going to have grants that need to be closed out. They're going to have grants that are being spent on that should not be being spent on. There's going to be like a whole bunch of things that you're going to be dealing with when you come into this portfolio and you're like, okay, let me look at this individual PI. You have a bunch of PIs making a portfolio. So I'll talk about it in the context of a PI, but then this just replicates out into portfolios. So the first thing I do when I go into any new situation is get a lay of the land. I just did a video where I talked about the lay of the land in a lot more granular detail. But in this case, what I'm talking about is what does it look like from a 30,000 foot view for this investigator, right? What active grants do they have? What grants do they have that need to be closed? What grants do they have that maybe are still being spent on and shouldn't be spent on? What are the things that need to be done to be able to call the portfolio clean, okay? Typically, it's a lot. But before you're going to be able to do any of this, you have to know what you're looking at. So I typically will go to whatever the source of truth is, the source of truth for the finances. And when I say source of truth, what I'm looking for is just a list of every grant that has ever existed in an organization, whether it's active, closed, whatever, all the PIs, just literally everything. Okay. And it's a real-time list or like arrears in 30 days, but in that general area. And I find my investigator on that list. When I look at that, what I'm trying to understand at that point is how many grants does this person have? How many grants do they really have, right? Are they active? Are they not? And if you look at the sheet, this is the same sheet I've used for many years. It's very simple. And the reason why I use it is because it is simple and I'm not trying to overcomplicate issues as much as I'm just trying to understand what is going on with this person, right? So that helps me by taking whatever the list is from wherever it is and putting it into my own format, which is this, and then adding my notes. So I will add my little notes in here. I specifically put this information because this is what's relevant to me, is the PI name, what is the internal grant number, who is the sponsor, what are the funds. You can see all this. So these are the things that I typically look for because this is the high level 30,000 foot view. I will go into deeper grant territory, absolutely, but I need to first know what am I looking at. Once I have this, I now know what the scope of work is going to be in terms of me getting a handle on just what's happening, right? So if somebody has 35 grants that are all active and they're all active and they're not supposed to be, let's say half of them are older years that need to be closed out, there's expenses that are posting, we're waiting on cash to be invoices to be paid. There's things happening with them, right? That is an enormous amount of effort and an enormous amount of work that I know I'm not going to get done in 2 days. I'm not going to get it done in a week. This is going to be a slow, bite-sized chunks of learning what is happening with this particular investigator. Because in addition to just having these grants, they also have all of this ancillary activities that are attached to it, right? Because then you've got the spending, staff, effort, compliance, progress reports, closeouts, right? There's all of these things, right? So if you think about yourself as a new RA walking in, getting this portfolio, the reason why I'm laying this out for you is to help you recognize that you are being handed a lot and many people feel like, oh my God, I should be able to get this, or Like I should be able to do this, or this feels overwhelming. Is this normal, right? The answer is yes, it is normal. Going back to the analogy from before where we talked about you coming 3 seasons in, you're coming 3 seasons in now also. Now you're looking at the finances, and so you have to sort of catch up to that. So once you have that full view of like what is happening, it gives you the scope of the idea. The next thing you need to do is reconciling. And Syra's going to do a video about reconciling, what it is, how you do it, that kind of thing, that I will share later on. But for now, we're going to just talk about it more as a higher level view. And if you, in the meantime, if you need help with reconciling, head over to Minessa.com, join the Patreon. It's free, and we talk about reconciling and things like that during our coaching calls on Tuesday. So you are more than welcome to join at any time, and we can talk about that then. However, once you have the understanding of all of these projects, you're going to then need to go into each individual project and like understand each individual project, right? So you're looking at the high level view. And if you think about it, you've got some grants that are tiny. Somebody got $10,000. They spent a little bit. There's like $2,000 left. They have an expense that's waiting to post to close out. It's easy. You have others that you're in year 3 of a 5-year project that has multiple subs, multiple carry forward. It's a program project. It's all over the place. That's going to take a lot more time. It's always very intimidating. I have never done this, and I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and I've literally never had the experience where I walk into a portfolio and I'm like, this is going to be so fun. Even though I love solving problems. I love God, cleanup is my favorite thing. There's a dread that comes before you dive in. It just is. And I think getting comfortable with that feeling has helped me enormously, because then I don't avert as much, which is why I think I'm good at this aspect of the job, is because I've just learned, okay, I'm really uncomfortable, dive in. In some cases, I won't. Like my psychology is strong, and it will literally, you'll be like, I don't know why I can't get started on that reconciliation. I've been meaning to do it for 6 months. Sometimes you're going to see something that intimidates you in such a way, and you're just like, I'm just not looking at it. And because you have so many other things to do, it's not like you're not doing anything. You're going to do 30 other things instead of doing that one thing. You're just going to prioritize differently. That is usually what gets us in trouble. So the first thing I always recommend doing when you are, reconciliation aside, because you're going to do the reconciliation, is check everything. Check the IDC rates. Check that IDC is posting correctly. Check with the people you need to check with to make sure that all drawdowns have happened the way they're supposed to happen if your organization doesn't have a standard methodology for that. Make sure that if you are in a much smaller organization, so something really important to keep in mind, a lot of people forget this, that if you are in a smaller organization that does drawdowns on, like, and you just do a couple of them, or like you don't, it's not something you do a lot, remember that you need to draw down the IDC and the DC as separate things. You don't forget, because I have had people come to me and say, well, we don't have as much money as we thought we did. Why? And it's because they didn't draw down the IDC. They only drew down the direct cost expenses. This is not the level at which most RAs are going to get involved, but I have had situations where the budget that posted on accounts was a higher budget than the amount that had been either received, drawn down, or for whatever reason, that money did not exist, but it looked like it did on the reports. So as the RA coming in, this is your opportunity to literally dig up anything that is a problem, because you are the discovery person here, right? Whatever you find, you're the hero. Okay, so that is something really important to keep in mind. There's nothing you're going to find when you take over a new portfolio that is your fault. And I don't like to think about things in fault anyway, but when we are looking for problems, it's really hard not to feel things, right? We feel things. So the thing to keep in mind is that when you find all these things, just make a list. You don't have to deal with all of them right away. In fact, I would not recommend dealing with them all right away. You want to understand what is happening. And initially, you're going to find yourself asking way more questions than having answers. The first few months are literally just going to be a bunch of questions. Where is this? How is this? Is this correct? Do the math again. Trust nothing. Trust nothing, do it again. Now, the tough part about this is if you're someone who's been an RA for many, many years, then this is easier to do than if you are brand new and this is your first reconciliation, or maybe you've done this for only in one organization. And so it's the mechanisms are all there, but you have to sort of figure out how it's done here, right? It's more difficult that way. So if you are someone who is comfortable with reconciliation spreadsheets and has had and you know if you are, then I'd actually recommend redoing all the recons and do them in whatever format it is that works for you, right? depending on obviously your organizational policies and processes and so on, right? And if you're brand new and do not have this experience, then I recommend using the reconciliations as they are, with the knowledge that the information that is in there may not be fully accurate, or you may find things that don't make sense. And that either you're going to explore, so you're like, this doesn't make sense, I'm going to figure this out. And that exploration will excite you, and you will then create your own reconciliation because you're like, this isn't necessarily working for me. I need to like do something that makes sense to me. Or you will, you'll figure out how to use that spreadsheet, and then that will become your spreadsheet. But if you haven't had the experience to know sort of which reconciliation spreadsheet you want to use or how you may want to do it or that kind of thing, then it's tough to say, hey, go in and do all the recons again, because you're missing the context and the experience with it. And that's fine. So you don't have to. But something to keep in mind is that even if you are not redoing the recons, check everything. Check all the numbers, check everything. Assume that everything is wrong and start again. I do not mean this as a slight against any RA, because when I do my own work, so something that I implemented many years ago when I was at the height of my migraine. So I was sick 28 days out of 31 days. So I was sick almost all the time. And when I was sick, I made mistakes. And you don't typically discover your mistakes until like 3 months later, right? So now I discovered my mistakes, and I'm like, how did I let this happen, right? And that sucks. So what I did is I now do periodic audits of my own work, assuming everything is wrong and trying to find the mistakes so that I can self-correct in advance, right? And because I know this is a thing that happens, and especially when you are overwhelmed and overworked, that is something that can happen quite a bit. So when I say assume everything is wrong, I do not mean that we're making judgments on someone who was there before. What we are doing is confirming that we know everything that is happening related to this particular project, this particular grant, this particular PI, this particular portfolio, and so on, right? And so we're sort of building up our security. And that's the most important part of this exercise, is that what we're doing, when I say, you know, the series is ostensibly called How to Have a Really Good Relationship with Your PIs. But what it actually really is how to develop confidence as an RA in the work that you're doing if you're new and feel a lack of confidence because of the things that you don't know, right? If you don't know what you don't know. Okay, so now we've done, all right. Okay, so we talked about grants, portfolios. Okay. While you're doing this investigation, you may find that you are connecting with many other people in different departments. This is a great way to connect with different people in different departments. You learn, oh, this is the clinical trials person, and this is the IRB person, and this is the IACUC person, or whoever the people are that you will be actually working with quite a bit. This will give you that opportunity to get to know them and the context in which they work, and then also in the context of where things are at any given point in a particular process. The other thing that I would strongly recommend as you're doing this is always ask the question, is there a way I can get this information myself, or is there a resource that I can access this? And the reason why I say this is because when we're sitting down in recons, there is a zone you get into. It's a great zone. I love it. It's meditative. You're like moving through expenses, and I'm looking at the IRB, and I'm taking care of salary and effort. It's a beautiful dance, and it's wonderful. And the more sources that you can access yourself, the more you'll be able to stay in flow, and the more your processes will develop in a streamlined way, right? The less things you have access to, and the less things that you can see that you have to kind of like hunt down and like, oh, I'm waiting for Jill, I'm waiting for Alia, I'm waiting for these individual people to get back to me. And that then every time you do that, now it's like you broke the flow, and then you have to pause, and then the email comes in, and you're like, okay, now I have to go back to that, but I have other priorities, and then you start to get averse to it, and then the whole thing happens. Believe me when I say this happens. This is the life. Thank you for watching. Another massive thank you to the supporters on Patreon who help keep my channel alive. You can support for less than $5 a month. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, LinkedIn, and my website. And as always, have a great day.